Buenos días, señor ministro.
Good morning, Mr. Minister. Good morning. I apologize. I'm driving. I'm stuck in traffic. So I apologize for the delay. How is it going?
Pues, bien.
We are well. Thank you. First of all, I would like to just welcome all of you. My work team, I know, is connected, the Director of Cooperation and Trade. So it is a pleasure to welcome you all. This event is extremely important within the framework of our programs, is essential, especially because we have identified that the agricultural sector has the potential, has great potential, but has been neglected in our country. But for sure, it will be the key element to move forward with our agriculture. We have a rescue plan for agriculture, which is in line with an economic rescue plan that will be executed this month strategically by area and by selected product. The importance of honey, cocoa and coffee, of course, is part of this process. And so we will, of course, follow this event. I will see the recording. I unfortunately have to go to an emergency meeting, but I will see the recording of this meeting to follow all the content. I would like to thank ICA for the initiative, for organizing this event, and for focusing on such important issues to us, and for always working with the government of El Salvador. I thank you. I send you my warmest greeting, and I hope this webinar will be fruitful. Thank you.
Perfecto, gracias, ministro.
Thank you very much. I am Jean-Charles Levalet. I am ICA representative in Canada, and I would like to officially welcome you to this webinar, How to Export Honey, Cocoa, and Coffee to Canada. We are joined by of course, supported by ICA and the Ministry of Agriculture here in Canada, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture with its headquarters in Costa Rica, but of course offices in Canada and in El Salvador. The person you just saw is the representative of ICA in El Salvador, and I am the ICA representative here in Canada. It's very important for you to choose the language of your choice, choose either Spanish or English so that the interpretation can flow. And if this is all about that, we will start the meeting officially. We will hear from Alaya Blais. She is a policy and program leader at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and she will be discussing the procedures and the regulations to export products to Canada. We also will hear from TFO Canada, and we will hear from Marisabel Gonzalez. She is the Program Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, and she will be discussing the Canadian consumers and buyers in Canada and how to export to Canada as well. We also have Rodrigo Giamatte, who is an exporter and producer of coffee, who will be discussing his experience as a Salvadoran exporter. We will have 15 minutes of questions and answers after that, and I do ask you to write your questions on the chat. We will be moderating the chat, and we will close with the promotion of the next webinar, and we will hear from His Excellency Ricardo Cisneros, Ambassador of El Salvador to Canada. First of all, I would like to give the floor to Alaya Blais. I will switch to English. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Alia, your mic is mute.
You are on mute.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. My name is Aaliyah Blais, and I work in the International Affairs branch at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Let's see here. So today I'm going to provide you a little bit of an overview on the rules and processes for importing food into Canada, as well as an overview of the Safe Food for Canadians regulations, some labeling requirements, and some information on food safety standards and guidelines. So to provide a little bit of a Canadian context, Canada is the 5th largest importer in the world, and we import approximately $44 billion per year from over 191 countries. Now, roughly 40% of the food products sold in Canada are imported, and many of the foods that are produced in Canada are made with imported ingredients. So the CFIA has a broad mandate that encompasses food safety, animal health, plant health, and international market access. And so what you're seeing on the screen right now is a little bit about CFIA's history and our vision. But to summarize what you're seeing here, we are a science-based regulator, and our goal is to ensure the well-being of Canadians, our environment, and our economy. Now, CFIA is not the only government department that plays a role in imported food. We have Health Canada, and they are responsible for establishing national health and safety nutritional standards for foods in Canada. So what they do is they conduct health risk assessments and evaluation on food contaminants. They will approve food additives, or they will set the limits for residues permitted in foods. And all of these standards and assessments that they do, these are all published in the Food and Drug Regulations. Next, we have Global Affairs Canada, and they are the lead for the negotiations of free trade agreements. And they're also responsible for the issuance of permits for supply managed agricultural products. And then what the last department that I have on this slide here is the Canada Border Services Agency. And the CBSA assists in the administration and enforcement of legislation as it applies to imported products. They are responsible for the initial import inspection performed at airports and other Canadian points of entry. The customs inspectors will review import documentation, ensuring that all required permits, certificates, licenses are presented before the goods are released. And at times too, they will also perform examinations of the shipments to verify that the information on the documents being provided are relevant to the goods that are being imported. Now, quite often, CFIA will liaise with the CBSA during border inspections, and we take advantage of their CBSA border lookout process to identify any high-risk goods as they're entering the country. Now, this illustration is showing the shared responsibility across the import continuum. And so what we're seeing here on the slide is we are seeing that the Canada Border Services works with CFIA, as I mentioned. And as I also mentioned, we set the rules and the policies for imported food products, and they are enforced by the CBSA at the Canadian border. But what's important to take away from this slide itself is the relationship or the responsibility between the importer and the foreign supplier or the foreign exporter. And what's important is that what we see here is that the importer and foreign exporter should be working together to understand the requirements for food that's being imported into Canada and to identify any Canadian requirements that may be unique from other foreign trading partners. And so some examples of that would be, for example, the French and English labeling requirements in Canada, our specific list of allergens that are required to be labeled on labels, or any specific food additives that are approved or chemical residue limits. So things like priority allergens or chemical residue limits, they can differ between Canada and other trading partners like the US or the European Union. So it's really important to understand what those Canadian requirements are. On this slide, what we're seeing is the import process, the generic import process, and we can summarize that into 6 different parts or sections, if you will. Firstly, starting with the requirements. So CFIA determines those import requirements based on our policies and our regulations. And we make that information available to importers as well as foreign exporters through our automated import reference system, which is found on our external website. So second part is the permissions. And so that is the responsibility of the importer to get the appropriate permissions to import. So with respect to food being imported into Canada, all imported food requires that the importer holds a Safe Food for Canadians license to import. Once the importer is aware of the requirements, that they've obtained their appropriate permissions, they can then proceed to importing the food. And they do that first, their first step will be to gain authorization. So what they do is they submit their import declaration prior to importing to obtain the approval that they are meeting all of the requirements for admissibility. Now at the border, that is where the shipment, the food will encounter CBSA. And so at that point, CBSA confirms that those requirements that has been shown, that has been displayed in our AIRS, our automated imports reference system, has been met, and that the product will be either permitted entry, or CBSA could also decide that it will not be permitted entry. So if a product is not permitted entry into Canada, it may be returned to the foreign exporter. Now, once a shipment has been released by CBSA, it can then proceed to its first destination. Now, at this time, depending on the commodity, the shipment can either be held for further inspection by CFIA, or it'll be permitted to be further distributed into the Canadian marketplace. And then the last part of our import process is reporting, and we do that throughout each of the different parts of this, or each of the different steps, if you will. So the Safe Food for Canadians regulations, or SFCR, applies to food that is imported, exported, or traded between Canadian provinces. And it also applies to food animals when the meat products derived from the animals will be exported or sent across Canadian provinces. Now, these are the regulations that CFIA is responsible for. And there are 3 main components of the SFCR, and that's licensing, preventive controls, and traceability. Now, the goal of licensing in the SFCR is to assign accountability and enhance the rigor of food safety up and down the food supply chain. It is based on, it's activity-based, and so it's determined by what a person is doing and not so much by what they are producing. So when we speak about licensing, it's the person that is importing food into Canada that needs to have the SFC license. Now, typically that is the importer who is physically located in Canada. As a foreign supplier, you do not need to have a SFC license to export food to Canada, nor do you need to register with the CFIA to export food to Canada. The second piece of the, or part of the SFCR is the preventive controls. And the preventive control requirements are based on internationally recognized principles of food hygiene, such as the good manufacturing practices, good agricultural practices, and the principles of hazard analysis and critical control points. They are outcome-based where possible to allow for flexibility and innovation. And the preventive controls also include procedures for investigations, complaints, and recalls. So the importer that we will be working with will want to ensure that the food that you're supplying them has been manufactured under preventive controls, and they will document this information in their preventive control plan. It's also called a PCP for short. So since importers must maintain a preventive control plan, a PCP, for the food they are importing, you may receive questions about the food safety hazards and the control measures that are in place for the products that you're supplying. And the last key component of the SFCR is traceability. The traceability requirements align with international standards, and the aim is to trace the food one step forward and one step back through the supply chain. The importer will be required to keep traceability documents for the food they import. And so there are three main things that the importer will have to be able to do. Firstly, they'll have to identify the product through product details, including common name, principal place of business, lot code, or other unique identifier. They will have to trace back. So that's the date on which the food was provided to them and who provided that food to them. And they'll have to trace forward. And so that's to whom they provided the food and the date which it was provided to this other person. So the importer in Canada will want to ensure that the products they are importing are labeled with a lot code or a unique identifier. Now, as I mentioned, importers will want to ensure that their foreign supplier is manufacturing, preparing, storing, packaging, and labeling the food under same conditions as food prepared in Canada. They will need to understand the hazards that are reasonably expected to occur. So you may get you may get questions about the food itself, about the manufacturing practices and the foods and the safety controls that are in place for the food. You may get questions about how you're addressing any hazards that are associated with the food. If you're part of a food safety certification program, they may ask about that, or they may even ask to visit your establishment or your warehouse to verify the controls themselves. All of this information that's being asked, that is there to help the importer build their preventive control plan. Now, regardless of the food being imported, all foods imported into Canada must meet the requirements of the SFCR. This means that the food must have been manufactured or grown under the same conditions as food prepared in Canada. So for some foods, there are very specific standards and grades that must be met, including container sizes, or fills. And these standards and grades can be found in the Food and Drug Regulations, as I mentioned earlier, or in the IBR documents. Now, IBR documents are documents that are incorporated by reference into the regulations, meaning that they're part of the regulatory text. So if you're exporting organic foods to Canada, they will need to be shipped with the appropriate organic certificates and meet any organic labeling requirements. So now I'm going to take the next few slides to speak specifically about coffee and cocoa and honey. And what you'll see in these few slides is that there's similarities between coffee and cocoa, and there's and even honey. But I'll go through this and we'll see if there's any questions in the end. But when you're manufacturing or sourcing coffee for the Canadian market, it's really important to work with the importer located in Canada to address all of the Canadian requirements related to coffee or cocoa or honey. And when I say that, I mean that it must meet any standards prescribed in the Food and Drug Regulation. For example, coffee and cocoa both have standards in specific sections of the Food and Drug Regulations, as you can see on the screen. What's a little bit unique about coffee and cocoa actually is that, for example, unprocessed coffee beans, they're listed in Schedule 1 of the SFCR. This means that for the importer, coffee beans do not require a license to be imported if they meet 3 specific requirements. And that's that the coffee bean is unprocessed, so it's raw, and it will be manufactured or processed for use as grain, oil, pulse, sugar, or beverage. So it's going to be processed in Canada. Number 2, it's not in its consumer packaging, so it's not packaged so that the consumer can purchase it at the store, and it must be labeled for further preparation only. If the coffee that's being exported to Canada is in the consumer packaging to be sold in Canada, it will have to meet all applicable Canadian labeling requirements. And then coffee, or any food really, cannot be adulterated with any contaminants or other adulterating substances as per the Food and Drug Regulations. So very similar to coffee, cocoa, again, has to meet the requirements in the Food and Drug Regulations. There's a section under Division 4 for cocoa. Cocoa beans also are listed in Schedule 1, so it can be exempt from the requirement for the importer to hold that license, providing it's meeting the three scenarios or 3 requirements that I mentioned in the previous slide. And then again, if you're importing cocoa beans or any other chocolate products in consumer prepackages, it must be meeting all of the Canadian labeling requirements. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, the food cannot be adulterated. With respect to honey, it's important that, again, when you're manufacturing or sourcing honey, that you're meeting all the Canadian requirements. There are a few more very specific food safety requirements that honey needs to be met. So the food safety standards related to veterinary drugs, antimicrobial residues, and chemical contaminants. There is a specific standard of identity prescribed in the Food and Drug Regulations for honey, and there are specific grades for honey that's described or prescribed in our IBR documents. That's volume 6 for honey. And all honey that's being sold in Canada, so if it's being sold in its consumer packaging on store shelves, it must meet the labeling requirements, and it cannot have any sort of fraudulent claims. As similar with the other foods and the cocoa and the coffee, it cannot be adulterated. I'd like to take a quick moment to talk a little bit about food fraud. So globally, honey is considered a high-risk commodity for fraud, and food fraud occurs when food is misrepresented by adulteration, ingredient substitution, counterfeiting, false, misleading, or deceptive labeling or advertising, and document falsification. In general, food fraud can have economic impacts on the food supply chain and can also have health or food safety risks for consumers. So CFIA takes food fraud very seriously. It is a joint responsibility between CFIA, industry, and consumers to combat food fraud. So when manufacturing and exporting foods for the Canadian market, it's important that you understand how the foods must be labeled. Most prepackaged food sold in Canada is generally required to adhere to the Canadian labeling requirements. So foods must be labeled with a common name on the principal display panel, date marking and storage instructions, dealer name and principal place of business, list of ingredients and any applicable allergens, net quantity in metric units, and a nutritional facts table. Labels in Canada must be in French and English, and the information and representations must be truthful, and not misleading. When a food product is manufactured outside of Canada, the label must show that the product is imported and the country of origin is required. So it's important to discuss with your importer what elements of the labeling requirements is required for the products that you're exporting. And we also do have on our CFIA website an industry labeling tool to help importers and food suppliers understand the Canadian labeling requirements. Food imported into Canada must also conform with the food safety standards and guidelines for Canada. So as you recall in earlier slides, I mentioned that some standards for food in Canada may not be the same as foods that you may be shipping to the US or the European Union. So when making food for the Canadian market, be aware of those standards and guidelines specific to Canada. The links on this slide is just to demonstrate some of the information that we have on our website under food safety for industry. So I've provided a quick overview on the requirements and I've provided a lot of information, but for more information on manufacturing or sourcing food for the Canadian market, the first step is to speak with your importer located in Canada, but you can also visit our website for the information. And so on this slide, I've highlighted the areas on the website that would be of use to foreign suppliers in terms of understanding what the requirements are. I do highly recommend taking a look at the information because when you do have those conversations with your importer, you will both be working on the same understanding of what the requirements are. Thank you very much.
Excellent as always, Alia. Good stuff. Great presentation. Thanks for the specifics on coffee, cocoa, and honey, which is the theme today. We did have one immediate question. Thereafter, we can switch over to the next presentation. There was one from Jorge. He was asking if importers need to be Canadian in order to become an importer.
Is a good question. The importer, to be a Canadian importer, you must have a fixed place of business located in Canada. If you do not have a business, that's why we recommend working with importers that are already located here. But we don't have a lot of non-resident importers.
Fantastic. Would you be staying with us throughout the session?
Yes.
For the Q&A? Okay,
Yes.
great. Then what I'll do is I'll switch over to Spanish. You
will see now that our market here in Canada is very different from that of the United States. A lot of people have much more experience with the people from the United States, but the system here in Canada is very different. We must understand those differences. Now I would like to invite Maria Isabel Gonzalez from TFO Canada to talk about consumers here in Canada and how to export to Canada. Maria Isabel, go ahead. Thank you so very much, Jean-Charles. Thank you all very much for being here. Now we are going to talk a bit about the Canadian market, its uniquenesses, the different import sectors, and as Jean-Charles said, so we can make a difference between the US and the Canadian market. I will share my screen. I hope you can all see it coming up. Okay, here it is. The first thing I will talk about, a lot of you know me and know about TFO. Let me briefly introduce ourselves. We are the Trade Facilitation Office here in Canada. Our mandate has been and continues to be to improve the living conditions of people through the creation of sustainable trade relationships among exporters from developing nations and Canadian and foreign buyers. We were founded by the Canadian government in 1980, and in 1985, we became a nonprofit NGO. We continue to do the same. We continue to export exporters, SMEs from developing nations with Canadian importers. Our office is located in the city of Ottawa, the capital city, but we have regional representatives in the three major import markets that are Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. Our clients are three exporting SMEs from developing nations, trade promotion institutions in those developing nations, and on this side, Canadian importers. We receive funds from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Global Affairs Office of Canada, as well as other regional and multilateral trading partners and governments. As I said, we have three clear types of customers. You will see this in a moment. We offer three types of services. Basically, our online services are available on our website in English, Spanish, and French, and these are for all SMEs from developing nations, all of them. However, our projects benefit certain countries. Allow me to explain how that works. And these are the types of users. We have foreign providers, the exporting SME, which we offer to promote online the exportable offer when they register on our website, which is free of charge. Access to important information on the Canadian market. We have a manual we have sectoral reports on the Canadian market, which we continuously update. And these are available also in Spanish. We also have publish a quarterly news bulletin aimed at exporters and trade promotion entities, where we inform and provide updates on what is happening in the Canadian import market. And we organize webinars on different subject matters related to the import market. All of these services are free of charge for those exporting SMEs that are registered in our website. On the other hand, we have the Canadian buyer, the user, to whom we offer broad information on foreign providers that are listed with us. And I will show this to you live so that to give you a better idea of what the Canadian buyers see when a foreign exporter registers with us. We also offer information about the countries we are working with, the different projects, basically to give them a bit more information about these markets. Links to the websites, and we produce a monthly news bulletin where we promote exportable offers from the SMEs that are registered with us during that semester. The trade promotion institution, well, for those, the services we offer are very much the same that we offer to foreign providers. Basically, the only difference here is that we work with them when we are negotiating or implementing projects, because these are our partners in the countries we work in. And they have access to certain programs and those projects we work with, which are like, for example, access to markets studies with Canadian universities, or joint funding of trade missions. Our services, as I said, are three very clearly defined. Online information services on the website with the export manual to Canada, market studies, webinars, news. We have a calendar of events, a schedule of events of all trade fairs in Canada, and which are attended by importers to seek their products. We also have advisory services. This is very much focused on our different projects. We work jointly with the trade support institutions and entities in training activities guided visits to become familiar with the marketplace. We develop market entry studies prepared by Canadian universities. So that is all the advisory services. All of this fits very well within the projects we undertake with beneficiary countries. The third service takes in two different manners. I call it online matching. We match the promotion of exportable offer with the Canadian importers that we do through the website with an exporting SME is registered with us and they register their exportable offer. The system takes all this information and they list it on the newsletter for the exporters at the end of the month. And if the importer is interested, they can directly contact the exporting SME. Physically and now virtually, much more than before, we are involved in virtual and in-person trade missions of exporters and importers. We bring them in either independently to the country, to Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver, or we bring them within the framework of exhibition or fair. And we provide a full agenda to make them familiar with our market, a training to participate in these meetings, and we recruit Canadian buyers that want to participate or work with these exporters. This is our website, and allow me a bit to change to our live website so you can see it, so that you can become more familiar with our services. Bear with me. This is our website. Our website, as you can see, is in all three languages. Here we see the English. We can now move to Spanish. One thing I would like to tell you now is that we are currently in the process of changing our website. It is going to be a new one in October. So for the time being, we have all this information that we are working on at improving our website to provide better services, more modern, more efficient services, faster information for our customers. But for the time being, this is our website. And it has the three customers here, the foreign providers, the Canadian buyers, and the trade promotion institution or entity. This is the landing page with a section that provides information on COVID, how it is affecting the Canadian import market. And we also have down here below, we have all the information on market intelligence, the countries with which we work, our webinars. We have all the recordings of these webinars, our stories of success, all those companies that have been successful entering the Canadian market hand in hand with us, our presence in the media and our trade news, which is continuously updated day by day. There is a series of trade events, both in Canada as well as internationally, that we promote for exporters in all developing nations. The importance of registering with us, well, we offer all this information free of charge. To get it, all you have to do is register with us. There are two types of exporters. An exporter without exporting experience, but is interested in the Canadian market, that has the product but not the experience. So for this exporter, we offer a series of data and information on the Canadian market. And the second group is the exporter that already has a minimum of 1 year exporting and that already has the exportable offer. And aside from the information, to them we offer the opportunity to promote their exportable offering online once a month through our newsletter. To register with us is very simple. All you have to do is complete 2 steps. The third one is basically add your catalog imagery of your products. And we even offer a tutorial video for that. Once you register with us, This comes here to headquarters, and the person in charge of the database proceeds with the approval. Why is it important for you to register your company? As a buyer, as a Canadian buyer, I would like a product, for example, from El Salvador. So I will go over here. I will see how many companies from El Salvador are listed and to see if they have the product I am looking for. So here we see 28 Salvadoran companies registered, and those that have our logo, that means they have already participated in projects and are have been trained by us to enter the Canadian market. So let us go here to Cafescal, El Salvador. Here you can see, this is what the importer sees. Information on the company, the contact person, quick data on what they export, if they have experience exporting, where, what they export. And the step 3, if you have a gallery of photographs or presentations or catalogs, whatever. This is what the importer sees when they are interested in a company or any particular product coming from El Salvador, and thus they directly contact the company through this profile. The other services we offer are very much focused on the Canadian market and the different levels of preparation. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I would like, because I would rather talk about the Canadian market, but there are several sections for you, those that are interested in exporting. We have guidelines of how to develop their market entry strategy, those that already have experience exported and want to enter the Canadian market with a given product. Well, we have all the information here about all the rules and regulations, certifications, prices, etc. Anything you would like to query is here. And as I mentioned, we have the sectoral market studies here, so you can see the behavior of the Canadian market in the different sectors that you may be interested in. We also have, let's see, a series of tools that help guide you to find the rules and regulations, see prices that you will get to once you have an account created. You will get a password and a username. So you enter here and you can see much more detailed information on how to use certain tools to know whether your product is accepted in Canada, what rules apply, what procedures. All of this is part of the information that is password protected. So basically, this is our website. I invite you to register with us. This is free of charge. You can benefit from all this information and you can learn more about the Canadian market. And now allow me to come back to the original presentation to speak a bit more about the Canadian import market. Okay. So the first thing we must understand is the difference between the US and the Canadian market. Canada is the second largest geographically in the world, but the population is much smaller. The inhabitants have been distributed differently because of weather reasons. We have a densely populated sector in southern Canada on the border with the United States, and focused on urban populations. However, further north in Canada, the population is minimal. One of the characteristics of the population in Canada that is important to understand for exporters is that the Canadian population is aging at huge steps. People older than 65 years are more and more continuously. In July 2019, there were more than 6 million Canadians over the age of 65 years. It is estimated that by the year 2030, the elderly population will be greater than that of children under the age of 10 in the province of Toronto. The average age in Canada increased 8 years ago. It was 42. Now it is 44 years. And there's an explosion of baby boomers, those born between 1946 and 1965. So what does all of this mean? Well, this population is retiring. They have purchasing power. They dominate the preference in the Canadian market. They prefer healthier products. They take care of themselves. So they are a huge market that dominates the consumption pattern. And therefore, exporters must pay attention to them when they examine the uniquenesses of the Canadian import market. The second most important component in the Canadian society, in the Canadian import market, is the immigrant population. More than 1 out of every 5 Canadians, as myself, born abroad and moving over here, despite immigration has been a high component for Canada. Between July 2019 and July 2020, we only received 411,854 new immigrants, basically due to the pandemic. That number of immigrants coming annually is usually larger. Canada has the 8th largest immigrant population in the world, and 62% of them, as I said before, are located in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. That is where the biggest demand, the most important consumption patterns in our markets. Why? Notice here on the pie chart to the right, 53% of these immigrants come from Asia. The vast majority of them are in Vancouver and Western Canada, a good percentage in Toronto as well as Montreal. However, where we can find them the most is out west, and they give that uniqueness to the Canadian market in this area, making it so much more different from the Quebec or the Eastern Canadian import market. There is a huge demand for Oriental vegetables and all the type of food products that they prefer. They have a big influence in the consumption pattern in Canada. Followed, as you can see, Middle East, Europe, United States, Africa, all of these groups make up the Canadian market, and there's a ever greater demand for foreign-based products for nostalgic reasons. The Canadian consumer, well, they are very well informed, very demanding, and they are wealthy enough, but they like to investigate, do the research on prices, compare, and get the best value added for whatever thing they are going to purchase. Usually they are homeowners. They have a dual income, although single person households are growing ever more. They are ever more multicultural. There are regional differences. As I said before, the behavior of the market is not the same as it happens in the East or in Toronto or in Montreal. The behavior is completely different. And you must be aware of this when you want to place your product in the Canadian market. They are very knowledgeable about internet and technology. And now with the pandemic, they very commonly purchase online. You have no idea of how much that has evolved over here. And they are involved in this, and are up to date. And aside from this, they are health and environment aware. There's a considerable importance for corporate social responsibility in Canada, as well as all those good environmental practices. Oftentimes in SMEs in developing countries, this is basically considered the responsibility or privilege of large corporations, and they do not realize that they are not doing it, that they are doing these things. Corporate social responsibility has been on the rise. And we have seen this in our meetings with importers where the question is, okay, talk to me a bit more about what you do to favor your community, to favor your employees, or to improve your company's reputation. This is basically a standard now in ordinary business meetings. And on the environmental side, they ask about the environmental programs you may have, what you do to contribute to this aspect in the sector. So these two matters are gaining greater relevance for Canadian importers. And you must take this into consideration when you prepare to introduce your company to a Canadian importer. Canada is an open market, very competitive, totally open to foreign trade. We depend very much on international trade, much more from the imports. As we well know, we are a country that lives in the winter for more than 6 months, low temperatures. We cannot produce very much. From October through April, this is the winter. And that is when the window for the importation of products in different sectors opens. And this is a window of opportunities for any of you. However, Canada is a highly regulated market, very demanding, according to many people. And if you have once already entered the Canadian market, it is easier for you to enter the US market because you are one step ahead. Canada has multilateral agreements with the many developing nations, and with Latin America, Canada has 9 free trade agreements. So just imagine the importance of the region. We also work hand in hand with the World Trade Organization, and we have the general preference, the preferential tariff system of the WTO. We have key players here: importers, distributors, agents, brokers, retailers. Our import requirements are very strict. Let me share this with you. It shows the different sectors, the different government departments that basically regulate or establish requirements for this. I will be sharing this presentation with Gloria so that she can pass it on to you in turn. But it is very important for you to be aware of all these organizations and that you understand all about the legislation that applies to your product that you want to bring into the Canadian market. The distribution system is quite similar to that of the United States. Importers, distributors, brokers, retailers. But notice this, the Canadian import market is 10 times smaller than the US market. Smaller importers are in contact, they know each other, they work together. So for you, a good if you have a good experience with an importer, it is certainly worth it, because they share all this information. So it is good to have good experience, a successful experience at the beginning, to develop that loyalty relationship with the Canadian importer as opposed to the US importer. They are much more pragmatic. Canadian importers seek long-term relationships. They don't like to be changing providers continuously. They want long-term relationships that are based on honesty, communication, continuous communication. So when we talk about importers and distributors, basically you can see these are the ones that directly sell to the retailer. They work on the clearance, they are in charge of all of that. And some of them, in fact, go one step beyond and work with the exporter in the country to export the product with all the meeting all the regulations, and they work training. There are so many cases of success. A broker or agent is much more specialized in certain products or in certain markets. For example, honey in a container, so you can get an agent, so who through a commission you pay them, they will represent that product for you in that market. They will present the product under a private label or under your label. They also work with a higher commission than an importer, but they ensure that they have the right buyer for your product. That is why they are so much more specialized. Retailers, large regional and multinational retailers purchase basically directly from the exporter. In the case of Canada, retailers continue to buy from medium-sized importers and producers for certain products. Well, sometimes they do purchase large volumes from the large producers, but they work basically with the importer and distributor to obtain those products they need in their different lines. You can find this all in fairs, our website. There are databases where you can get information. Oftentimes you expect to get contact information directly. That will not be so because of privacy reasons, but you can get information about the company, email, and basic information for you to prepare your proposal and then generate that interest. These are the most important or the most common trade fairs for produce, CL Canada, CHFA for natural and organic products. There are different chapters, East and West. CPMA, we have grocery innovations, and they work with smaller companies in other sectors like gifts and decoration. These are the two most important fairs, and clothing and shoes. So I invite you to follow us on our web, on the social media. We have continuously update information. Register with us and you can be part of our database so that you can get information to participate in webinars and be part of this information. You can benefit on all this information about the Canadian market. If you have any question, I am at your service here. We have a team, and both Marleta as well as Carlos help exporters with whatever questions they may have and whatever information they may need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And on the contrary, it was really an excellent presentation, and I do recommend to consult this guide. It's worthwhile reading from beginning to end, because for exporters to Canada, it is really the Bible. So I do recommend that you read it. You have to register to access it, and the document is in Spanish, so it's very important for you to read it. The three products that we are discussing today have very different markets. We do produce honey in Canada, actually 80 million pounds of honey, and we export half of it to the United States. So half of our production goes to the United States. And we consume actually lots of coffee. Coffee after water is the #2 drink in Canada. And those who drink coffee drink 3 cups a day. So they spend billions, trillions in coffee in Canada. So they have grown, the consumption has grown by 300% in Canada, for coffee. And for cocoa, this is a market of approximately 3 to 4 billion. We don't produce cocoa, so we must import it. And in terms of consumption here, it's about 6 kilograms per year per Canadian. And we are about the 8th consumer in the world in terms of importance. So there is a market here, but you have to know your competitors. You have to know other countries, for example, in Africa that export their products. So this needs to be studied and analyzed, and you can do this at the website of TFO. We have the honor of having Rodrigo Giamatte. He is an exporter and there are many good practices that he can share with us. So I do encourage Rodrigo to take the floor. Good morning. I don't know if you can hear me. As you mentioned before, my name is Rodrigo Giamatte, and I have been in the coffee industry for 14 years. And we have competed. I mean, we have worked on the farm actually with my father since I was a child. He was someone who worked with large cooperatives, of course. And I started working in the world of coffee because of the coffee school that we founded with the Coffee Council of El Salvador and the Coffee Culture Institute. And we started roasting coffee at a local level and exporting some pounds of coffee, I don't know, for my friends in other parts of the world. That's how we started. And I ended up working with the Canadian market by setting up a company to import, and it's called Firebutt Coffee Roasters. And we have currently exported 4 containers of 20 feet in the time frame between, I don't know, we started in 2017. Our operations, and here we are now. Obviously, the pandemic has set us back a bit. But we have found some importers in Canada of special coffee, and we have worked with them directly. And the coffee markets, as we heard from the previous speakers, is completely different from in Canada than it is in the US. This market is much more massive, it's larger, and for now it is less specialized. And it is growing. However, not having, a relationship with special coffee importers. In 2017, we started trying to open up operations with Canada. And of course, you cannot import coffee if you are not located in Canada, as was said before, because the equivalent of the FDA in the United States, but in Canada, Health Canada and the delegations require a direct connection or link with between the importer and the exporter. But contrary to what people think, which is that it's difficult to export to Canada, actually the procedure and the paperwork is actually much easier than for the United States. Actually, the permits are much simpler. to obtain. We do not need to register the imports as we need to do it with the FDA. And only if we receive an inspection of on the container, like was mentioned, the controlled inspection, that's where it might become a bit more complex, because you will pay a lot for this inspection, approximately $2,000 per container. So if you do not consider this, it may really imply a big difference in cost. Canada is growing its market, and we have many migrants right now, people who come from abroad and from different nationalities. Because of the weather we have here, they drink strong dark coffee. That's why maybe puts us at a disadvantage, because these other coffees are coffees with great volume. However, the market is there, but we cannot access sometimes with our Arabica or our other types. However, with the special kinds of coffee that are produced at high altitudes in our country, we could. So we must point out the fact that in terms of exports, there will always be an importer receiving things and who works on the paperwork and the procedures. However, at the same time, we need to have a direct tie with the market, because if not, the market cannot, our product will not reach that market. And one of the biggest mistakes we've made as a coffee producing country, with countries like Canada, for example, is that we bring the national roasted coffee to the market there, and we introduce ourselves with a pound of coffee. I will not say just any coffee, but maybe a coffee with low quality, maybe, or not so good. And, maybe it's been roasted with a basic quality control. And so we arrive at this market and we have this little bag of coffee and try to sell it. So that will not allow us to really be competitive. So this is the story of a typical story that you will hear from El Salvador, from Honduras, that are trying to export coffee. So this is why sometimes we run into these problems. Salvadorans arrive in Canada with a coffee that is similar to the quality that you obtain in the supermarket, and they try to sell it as specialized coffee. And it's really not, this will really not work, because they really want this special kind of coffee. And we must remember that coffee is the #1 drink in Canada after water. And since water sometimes is not sold, but is just consumed, we could say that coffee is really #1, and it's part of the basic food basket. So the drink coffee, both the green coffee, roasted coffee, and the actual bag of roasted and ground coffee does not have any components. So they don't have any taxes, and they don't have any tariffs. They're not subject to any tariffs. So we are seeing an increase in the market, especially in these new markets such as Canada. So we believe in it, and we believe that we can meet that demand. Currently, you will find coffee from Brazil, from Costa Rica, from Colombia, and maybe from Guatemala and Honduras, but El Salvador in Canada, like single origin, very difficult to find. So maybe it's a couple of containers. I would say that less than 10 containers per year that go to Canada. So I think there is a window of opportunity there for producers and for exporters in terms of this market. This is my intervention, and of course, I will answer any questions that there may be. I know that there are maybe a few minutes left for questions, so I will be glad to answer them. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, and I think that all producers and exporters can write their questions on the chat to maybe ask something more specific or things like that. Just for you to know, I have a small tree with coffee. I have enough green coffee to make 2 espressos per year. That's what I own. So we do produce some coffee in Canada. Let me show you. Yes, take this opportunity to show you. Actually, this is the bag of our roasted coffee in Toronto. And this is not just any kind of coffee. Yes, to be able to participate, Canadian companies are extremely competitive. They do not leave you much room for maneuver. Yes, they want the business, and this is an important business at several figures. So in order to arrive there, we must compete with, we cannot compete in terms of volume. We have to compete in terms of specialty coffee. I agree. Yes, because there's a certain segment that's willing to pay a premium for that. Yes, we have a question from Hazel Hernandez. I have received many consultations regarding the use of franchises for coffee stores in Canada. I'm not sure if we can answer precisely on this issue, the franchises for coffee stores in Canada.
Además del edificio, cuesta más. Tim
It's
Hortons.
more costly, like Tim Hortons, Starbucks. We have them across the country. And with COVID, people consume more coffee in their house. But we will see how this plays out in the future. I will switch to English.
I think, so voy a cambiar de idioma, English. Okay. So some people are asking about how to obtain a export license and what are the requirements.
So what I mentioned in my presentation, if you're located outside of Canada, there's no requirement for an export license. The responsibility of the license belongs to the importer that is located in Canada. So they will be responsible to obtain a license to import into Canada. And where your responsibility falls is with helping the importer to meet the requirements related to the product. So if there's specific labeling requirements, then the labels that you apply to the product will need to meet the requirements. So a lot of the things related to licensing or the preventive control plan, it is the responsibility of the person that's located in Canada to meet these things, but you help them by providing the information or ensuring that the product is being manufactured appropriately.
And then another question for you, who is responsible for compliance and preventive controls?
So it's a little bit tricky since you need to work with someone that's located in Canada who is not at the manufacturing facility or at the farm or whatnot, but the importer is responsible for ensuring that the food that they're sourcing is being produced under preventive controls. And the reason why I mentioned this in my presentation is because the importer here, when we as CFIA go and do our inspection on the importer, we look at a lot of their documentation. We look at of the information that they have. And they need to show us. They need to show us that the person that they are sourcing their food from is using HACCP, for example, does have food safety controls when they're producing the food, and that it's reasonably containing or preventing any hazards that would be inherent to the product. So again, it is the importer's responsibility, but they're going to rely on the exporter or the foreign supplier to help them understand how the product is being produced, because they will have to show us, like, what are the conversations that you've had with your supplier? What information, what assurances has your supplier provided to you to ensure that the food is safe, the food is being produced similar to food that would be produced here in Canada?
Fantastic. Thanks, Alia. Voy a pasar al español.
Allow me to switch to Spanish now. I have a colleague from ICA, the representative of ICA in El Salvador, who wants to share a few words. And after that, we have one more question, and with this, we move to COEXPO. Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. We hope this seminar of how to export money, cocoa, and honey to Canada is of benefit to all of you participants. The main objective, as you must have realized, is to create new markets for Salvadoran products going to Canada. This was organized jointly by the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock in El Salvador, the Salvadoran Embassy in Canada, and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, through its two representatives in Canada, which are Jean Charles and El Salvador, myself, Shane Nochaeta. For those of you that do not know him, the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock of El Salvador is with us, Mr. David Martinez. He leads the master plan for agriculture under his ministry since April the 8th, 2021. He is a member of the Inter-American Board of Agriculture, which is the maximum authority at ICA. These spaces are very important and valuable to share experiences of El Salvador exporting products, as Mr. Giamatte has shared. I would also like to thank the valuable presence and the time of all our speakers and producers. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Shani. A last question for you, Maria Isabel. How to have access to the network of importers to start a relationship based on fairs? Oh, well. First of all, Karen, thank you very much for your question. Please register with us on our website. We have several links there. Importer databases where you can get more information. We can guide you on where to look for more. Contact me directly, and we can speak further about your product to see in which of the provinces there may be a demand. Register with us, write to me, and we can continue to work on this together. Would you like to add your email in the chat, Maria Isabel? Now allow me to invite CoExport to promote the next webinar on this export series. Thank you so very much, Doctor. I am a technical manager of CoExpo. For us, it has been a pleasure to cooperate developing this event. We consider that the Canadian market is an excellent opportunity for many exporters that seek to export or diversify their markets they currently have abroad. We thank Alia and Maria Isabel for their very valuable information. They have very well summarized the guidance. This is very valuable for us. We always promote this among our exporters, not only for our products, for these products, but many others. And I especially thank Kika for having coordinated with the Ministry of Agriculture this presentation to see the different opportunities our producers may have. Thank you so very much, Rodrigo. To share your experience and vision of the market has been very valuable for a new exporter. You are saving them several steps by sharing your experiences and your vision of how the Canadian market behaves and performs. With TFO, we have had a long-term relationship, and we are always promoting and carrying out events jointly to take advantage of the trade opportunities in the market. The next event, which is the reason I am talking to you right now, is part 2. You already heard about the opportunities. You have all kinds of materials to examine, to consult, to see how prepared your product is. But you also need the second part, how to export from El Salvador. What steps, what processes, what paperwork, and that is what the second event will be about. Start by registering in the Salvadoran Council, Export Council, and you must guarantee of food safety. That is one of the elements you have to document. And the Ministry of Agriculture would be responsible for that part. We also have a single window for export and import processes where you can do some of the paperwork virtually, and we are adding new processes to make it 100% virtual. Another important aspect is the declaration of origin of your products. You already saw we do not have one of these. The origin must be declared as a marketing tool. This is a 100% Salvadoran product, is very different from a product mixture of different origins. So through these registers, not only do we complete the process for El Salvador, but also for Canada. Something else is good practices for export logistics. A lot of people do not consider this aspect. And when you're talking to a customer, they say, okay, I want the product in 1 month. Well, you have to know all the steps to deliver the product. And as part of that process, you have the exit of the product from your country and the entrance into the other country. And that part of logistics is very important. So you need to have all the knowledge about the different requirements of the country of origin, the country of destination, so that you can comply with the timeliness of delivering your product and complying with all the requirements. As co-export, we also consider important working together with COESA and TFOC. We have to see about how to better promote our product. You will be given some information on this, and then after that, you can participate in events thereafter. And lastly, we will share a tool with you called Statista for market research. In this case, it will evolve around the Canadian market. It will be a similar session as today, and we hope you join us. Because this is to complete the export business, you need to understand the market, You have had a first induction today, but you need to understand the rest of the product to streamline the export. Without further ado, I invite you. This will be on August 27th. You will receive an invitation, a formal invitation. So thank you all very much. Once again, our appreciation to all the institutions and people that have collaborated to make this a very summarized session, but very, very, very deep and great depth about what the market is like and how to position yourself and enter the Canadian market with great success. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Ana Leonor. I also thank you for your participation. Thank you, Co-Export, the Ministry of Agriculture, the embassy here. We are almost neighbors. So on behalf of ICA, I thank you very much for your time. I will offer the floor to the Ambassador of El Salvador in Canada, His Excellency Ricardo Cisneros, for closing remarks. Thank you very much, Jean-Charles. Thank you all for the support we have received from ICA Canada and ICA El Salvador. Thank you, Jean-Charles, and all the team that has been with you, and ICA El Salvador through Dr. Ocheta, and all of those that have participated in organizing this event. If we look at the international coffee market, the United States and Canada represent approximately 47% of our exports. The bad news is that 47%, only 3% comes to Canada. The other 97% goes to the US. The good news, though, is that this is a market that has not yet been explored. We have not been able to see beyond the United States. We are somewhat short-sighted here. Canada is a good market for our products, and coffee, cocoa and honey have a big potential in this country. The most important part then is to learn more about the consumer. The more you know about the Canadian consumers and the differences we have as compared to the US consumer, the better you will be able to export your products here and position them exactly the way we want to position our coffee, so that it is recognized as quality, of excellence, gourmet coffee. Ever since we started to work here for the last 6-8 months, ever since I arrived here in Canada as ambassador, we have held several events, one of which was a coffee round with importers and coffee roasters, which seek quality coffee and precisely seek quality of a single origin in coffee. So we have tried to promote as much as possible this single origin to connect quality with El Salvador and coffee from El Salvador. So it is so very important to continue promoting this quality with all consumers. We have organized this event here together with ICA, and we have received great support from ICA. The Ministry of Agriculture has coordinated the participation of producers, and in fact, we are more than 24,000 producers, coffee producers in El Salvador, and we have to find ways to export more coffee to this paradise here in Canada. We have organized another event, which is very important, and we invite the Salvadoran community here in Canada to promote coffee. It is very important that each Salvadoran here in Canada, and which are many, each Salvadoran that receives a Canadian friend here can share a cup of Salvadoran coffee with them. This is the best way to promote our coffee, so that each one offering a cup of coffee very well prepared for our Canadian friends, this can be of great benefit to promote our country. So we continue to work. I would like to thank Ms. Alia Blake for all the information she has shared on the regulations to enter products into Canada. Maria Isabel Gonzalez, whom we have known. Thank you for sharing her experience on how to export to Canada. and what Canadian consumers are like. I would like to thank you all for all of this. Rodrigo Giamatte for sharing with us his good experiences and good practices. We wish you great success in your future business. And in ending, I hope that the next event we organize with CoExport is also successful, thanks to Ana Leonor Diaz. August 27th, we will see each other again to continue working on this. And once again, Jean-Charles, thank you so very much for your support. I would like to thank the Ministry of Agriculture, Mario Giaretti, and others for the support in this event. And I wish you all great success. Do not be afraid of this Canadian market. This is a market that you can penetrate very easily. I'm sure you have the trust and the tools to do so. So we will continue to support us. Don't hesitate in contacting us. We will be here to share the best route and the best contacts. Welcome to Canada, and let us continue to be in contact. Thank you all very much, and see you August 27th. Congratulations to everyone for a wonderful event. Thank you. Thank you all. Take care. Goodbye.
Gracias.
Thank you.